Hello everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and today I would like to share with you all my final thoughts on the Kunwu Knives Padre. Now this particular variation is the DLC coated reverse tux variation. I know there's a couple other patterns, colorways out there. There's like a full stonewash one that would have probably been the one I would have gotten just because I like stonewash. But this was made available at a time that wasn't really the time that I should have been buying knives. As a lot of you may know, I'm married already and I'm very happy being so. But this came available a couple months back, and I went ahead and made the purchase, the little payment plan and everything. So the knife was already paid off by a couple weeks by the time this finally got to me. But this was a pretty pricey thing that I sought out to get, and you know what, I don't regret it. This thing is pretty awesome and I've been enjoying it ever since I got it in hand. I know a lot of people are going to be saying the same thing that have this in their collection. There are many people that own multiple of this design because while it is very different and a little wacky looking in overall design language, the functionality, the fidget factor, the quality of this thing, it's all there. It's awesome. This thing checks so many boxes for me. And we're going to go through and just start from the beginning of the process. We're going to do some size comparisons with stuff that I have. While this looks like a relatively large knife and it has such a large design presence, out in use in public and things like that, it's really not that big. Especially how, it fits in hand. So we're going to get into that right now. Let's start with some size comparisons, and then we'll do the price. So the first one here is going to be the Sencut Knives Glide Strike. As you can see, the Glide Strike is a little bit longer overall, not by much. We Praxis, little longer as well, but not by much. Next two are going to be the Civivi Vision FG, a little bit shorter than the Padre. That was a gross deployment. There we go, nice and snappy. Spyderco Manix 2 lightweight. So these guys, shorter than the Padre. And then last two are a little bit more compact designs. Oh, I am just missing deployment on these things. All right. This is the CMB Maiden Knives Predator. And last but most definitely not least is the Spyderco Native 5. So hopefully these 6 knives help you guys get a good visual representation of what this guy is really all about. The price on this, for me, it was about, I think, $318, $317, something like that. It's a good chunk of money for sure. Zero regrets. This thing is awesome, and we're just gonna go and start through this whole thing, just showing off some of the things that I absolutely love about it. Let's do some up and closey. Now, while this has a polished DLC, it's over a satin. And you guys know, or at least people who frequently watch my content, I hate satin. I think it's fucking disgusting. Just not a fan of it. But once I saw that there was something that could have been done to satin to essentially keep it pristine, I'm all for it. Now, because there is a polish, you do got to use something to clean it because it's a fingerprint magnet, and just really anything kind of ruins the sheen of this thing. It's absolutely beautiful. I've been using this right here. This is just like the fine spray invisible glass, like glass cleaner. It's nothing fancy or proprietary, or relatively inexpensive stuff. But let's take a good up and closey of this thing. That's freaking beautiful, right? It's kind of, it has this like bronze tone to it. It's not full black. You can see right there. It's kind of bronzy, reflecting some of the light there. I think it's beautiful. You see right there, by the blade material, Vanix. Now, I don't know squat about Vanix. I know that on its own, it is very rust resistant. Edge retention comparison to, I honestly don't know yet. I haven't put an edge on this because I've just been stropping this thing. I use it to break down a bunch of heavy duty produce boxes. went bulk grocery shopping, and from our local Sam's Club, we bought a bunch of stuff that we throw into boxes that they offer to people who are, heading out the door, so that way they can just have less things to load up into their vehicle. And they're usually pretty robust boxes. This had zero problem going through all that kind of stuff. Now, this blade shape, it's pretty wacky. I'm calling it the moose knuckle blade shape because just look at it. It's freaking beautiful. It's thick and juicy as hell, relatively tall. This right here in the beginning, I thought that it was actually going to be straight, but it's actually just the tiniest little clip. It's weird. I'm not the biggest fan of clip points, but because the tip is so low in relation to the pivot, in use in my place of work, I love this thing. It's been awesome using it. So it's weird and wacky looking. The design language, it's definitely far out there, at least for me. I typically have, as you can see just from my size comparison knives, these are like my elite knives, the knives that I grab all the time. They're not just sitting here collecting dust. My size comparison knives are in their position because they are knives that I genuinely gravitate towards when it comes to everyday use and carry. This thing really checks off a lot of boxes and shares a lot of the similar design language in comparison to a lot of those knives. It has a useful blade shape, good blade material, incredible ergonomics, and while it is on the larger side, truth be told, I'm not the biggest fan of large knives, but it turns out I actually have a lot of larger than average knives in my collection that I actually gravitate towards a lot and use. And I've started noticing that now that I have stuff like this in my collection and a couple other things, like I have a Microtech MSI. I use that a lot. While the cutting geometry isn't out of this world, I gravitate towards that knife because of its design language. It's just so ergonomically simple and easy to get around with. But it's a very large, long knife, I suppose. So when I go and I grab something else, like my bug out or my sea otter, those feel tiny to me now. This, I mean, yeah, it does still feel like a large knife. It looks like a large knife, but as you saw with the other comparisons, it's smack in the middle of a lot of things that are on the more compact side and maybe just a little bit larger than average. So this thing's pretty cool, and I think a lot of people would actually like it. So if you're still kind of on the fence of getting a Padre and maybe you don't want to get this variation, now I don't remember what the other variations, like the ones that are just like full stone wash or have the raw satin, those might be a little bit more affordable, probably. I mean, there's technically less work that has gone into them, so I would think that they'd be more affordable. Just go ahead and get one of those. Like, I wouldn't shy away from it. Like, I have full confidence in this purchase now that I actually have it in hand. So let's talk about this handle, the milling in particular. It's aesthetically beautiful, visually speaking. It feels incredible in hand. There really wasn't much that was missed. I think there was a lot of thought actually put into this design overall. The one thing, one of the most, honestly, one of the stupidest little nitpicks I could possibly come up with that I would say maybe some people would agree with is the pocket clip and the quality of the pocket clip. Now, not talking about the shape or the design of the pocket clip, but the fact that it sits on top of this relatively aggressive diamond milling there, it's not the best in and out of the pocket. So you would need, I suppose, thicker, a little bit sturdier pant material for the pocket seam for it to ride a little smoother, but it will wear out your pockets. It's really just unavoidable. The only thing that I could really think of possibly is if you guys are longtime viewers of the channel, you may remember that I used to have a fully customized Metin Boss Zirconium build that was on a Benchmade Osborne 940. That thing was awesome. I called it the Black Knight because it was the Blade HQ exclusive with the blacked out M4, had all blacked out hardware, and I got satin finished milled zirconium scales and clip and little spacer standoffs for this Osborne, and it was a beautiful knife. But the way the Metin Boss designs their premium clips, they're very rigid clips, but they're considered floating clips because they actually ride above the actual surface of the scales. It's so tight that really only maybe the thickness of a dime would slide between the clip and the surface of the scales. The retention in the pocket was absolute, but a lot of people didn't like that. Even though it was a relatively sturdy, rigid clip, it was considered a tapper. So some people aren't really the biggest fan of Metin Boss's clips and usually opt not to get them when they are, getting a build from that particular manufacturer. But that's really the only thing that I could think that would have maybe made this experience in and out of the pocket a little bit better. But a lot of people aren't really going to mind that. It's something that you're kind of going to have to just be okay with when getting something with aggressive texturing as this is. Now, to my knowledge, I don't think there's a padre that doesn't have this, possibly. Maybe that might be something for the future. Technically, less time on being milled, it should be a more affordable variant, right? That's something that I would think. Now, like I mentioned, I don't know if there is one without the milling, but now having it in hand, I would probably take this out and use it a whole lot more if it had, maybe a little space, a little gap, and maybe have been a floating clip. Just because I don't want to have to tear up my pockets. And on the pants that already are a little torn up, this just kind of makes it worse. It gets hung up on some of the threads. So it's not the best thing in and out of the pocket. But once it's finally out and I'm actually using it, it's incredible. Now I want to go talk about some of the material that we're working with here. Backspacer and clip, they are milled tie. They're beautiful. The backspacer itself, it's about a third length of the way. It's not a full backspacer. Just if anybody's curious, you cannot, and I do need to trim my nails, but even then I can't even touch that live edge, maybe a little bit back here, but you're not gonna actually like feel that, at least for me. So if you have thicker fingers, again, my fingers are on the slimmer side, even then I can't touch that live edge. So that's wonderful. Even to pick out that tip, you can't get to it. So the backspacer itself has some knurling here on the spine, and it does protrude a little bit, adding just a little bit of grip in the back. Pardon me. All the hardware on here is T8, including the pivot, but it's steel. The only T6 is going to be the hardened steel and over travel stop tab there that's inside. You can see it's right in there. It has a ceramic detent ball and multi-row ceramic bearings that are in a Teflon, or I think it's a nylon cage, Teflon, nylon, whatever. It's the plastic white stuff. So in the unboxing, I had made a comment saying, oh, well, let me get some skiffs for this. Skiff don't technically make multi-row ceramic bearings for this model as far as I know. Now, if anybody out there knows of someone that does make upgraded bearings, let me know, because I'm interested. Now, the action on this, as you just saw there, it's improved definitely from the unboxing. I just cleaned this out and put some KPL heavy. I did actually have to tune this thing up a little bit to make it a little bit stronger. I wanted it to be a little snappier. I felt like it was maybe just a little bit on the looser side. It loosened up over time. But what I did was I just disassembled it. I pushed the frame in just the tiniest bit. And it made a good bit of difference to me. You still have incredible action, lockup that is just absolute, and I love it. So 0 detent lash there when it's locked up and the pivot is nice and tight. zero side to side. You do have, instead of a traditional stop pin, you do have internal stops that are part of the blade. So it's a hole with a pin through it. That pin rides on what would be, garaged stops. So that's a cool thing. I do definitely enjoy that, and I prefer that. So it gives a little bit of a different feel when it comes to lockup, and technically less room for error. So one thing that I do notice when it comes to a lot of other knife designs that have a typical traditional stop pin is if that stop pin and the corresponding holes that are milled in the scales to accept the pin, if they are not perfect and absolute, eventually you might get a little bit of up and down. Even if it locks up solid, you might get a little up and down because that pin in the back has the tiniest bit of wiggle. So now the same could be said technically for the garage stops, but I personally believe that there's less room for error with garage stops. It's just what I see visually speaking. Now, I'm not a machinist. I'm not a knife designer by any means, but from what I see and from what I've experienced with what I have in my collection and I've handled in the past, I truly believe that there's less room for error with garage stops. And while it's probably a little bit more complicated to machine once you have the machines and the technology to make designs such as this and incorporate that lockup solidity and feel and everything, yeah, it just looks better. I think it sounds better. So there's that. But really, at this point in time, there's not a whole lot much else to talk about. Maybe one last thing is I've only handled, I would say, maybe 3 things from Kunwu at this point. This padre, of course, I used to have a Chad. I had their crossbar Chad, and I thought the build was incredible. I thought the design language, that aesthetic was beautiful. I just wasn't a fan of their severely underpowered Omega Springs, but there were plenty of people that do enjoy that particular design, and I understand that I am in the minority of disliking the Chad for its Omega Spring quality. But the build and everything else was undeniable. It was beautiful, and it felt great in hand. But one thing that I did notice, that all 3 things that I've experienced from Kunwu, including, what else? Excuse my reach. This guy right here. This is the Asher Full Tie Spiro. This is the drop point in 20 CV with the steel liner. So yeah, it's the inset liner variation, not the frame lock one. This is produced by Kunwu, and it shares the same quality, I suppose, caliber or issue if you want to be dramatic about it, but there is movement within the pivot. So if you want to call that pivot lash, it exists. It exists in all 3 things that I've handled from Kunwu, and while it is probably one of the most insignificant, most stupidest things that I could possibly think about complaining about, it is something that I believe is worth noting. If you're spending multi-hundreds of dollars on an enthusiast piece such as this, I think it's worth telling you guys about. So for me, it's really not that big of a deal. Again, it's worth noting. It doesn't affect the experience, the action. You do have the front flipper here, the positioning, the design, well executed. I complained a little bit at first about how the jimping was done, but in use, it's awesome. I could even go with my with the side of my index finger, and my hands aren't like super dry. I do have the tiniest bit of lotion because my hands were getting really fucked up from work. So they're a little bit slick, but even then, the jimping has ample bite to be able to actually deploy it comfortably. It's not too strong, it's not too weak, it's not just gonna flop out there, right? It's not, I mean, this thing's not going anywhere. It's great. So that's wonderfully designed. The hole, while it looks kind of funky, you have, it's like not completely cut all the way. Functionally speaking, it's wonderful. I have 0 complaints. It's not sharp, it's not snaggy or crispy or anything like that. It's very well rounded off, and it feels premium. It does feel excellent in hand and in use. If I didn't already mention, there's a ceramic detent ball. This thing is still what I believe would be still breaking in, because while I've taken this thing apart probably like 3 times at this point to just clean it out and make sure any kind of pocket dust or lint kind of is out of the way. And I wanted to have this in as good of an action as I can get to show you guys how well this thing is actually performing when it comes to the closing. Yeah, that's pretty good, and I got 0 complaints about that. Now, even just in the time that I've been showing this thing off, you can see there's already a bunch of oil marks and stuff all over this thing. So it's just something you're gonna have to be okay with. So if this is something that you like, just understand absolute fingerprint magnet on this variation, the reverse tux and the raw satin, and that it may tear up your pants. So just, be aware of that. You can reverse the clip, which is cool. I absolutely enjoy the fact that they allow this design to be appreciated by lefties alike. But I don't believe that they make exclusive lefty variations. I think that would be really cool if they did, but Kunwu is already struggling when it comes to keeping up with the demand. They have a really cool design aesthetic. They make incredible knives, and in doing so, they can't really keep up with the demand. So to be able to fit in models specifically for lefties would be pretty difficult, but in the future, I hope that they do something like that. So that's really all I have to say about this thing. I love it. I think it's great. If I had an opportunity to buy the full Stonewash versus this one, I wouldn't care. I like the design overall. In hand, in use, fidgetability is just, it's all there. It checks so many boxes when it comes to maintenance, disassembly, even sharpening as well. While I have not put my own edge on this, there is a good bit of flat right here to where when I put it into my sharpening system, it should be able to get a good purchase. I'm not going to nick anything around here because the edge is so far up and away from everything else that I can go ahead and just sharpen this thing without really being like super diligent and careful to not have my stones nicking any other part in its path. But yeah, very happy to have this in the collection. This thing is definitely a winner in my book. And if the rumors are true about the mini Padre coming towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year, you guys are probably going to see it on the channel if I can even get one of them, because these things, they move really fast, and I understand why now. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much. I appreciate all your support and your patience, of course. If you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing, because I have plenty more videos and content coming you guys this way. And with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.